Hello guys, yesterday Anthropic released Claude Opus 4.6 and then minutes later GPT-5.3-Codex was released by OpenAI, and I decided to test them together on the same projects, a few projects, same prompts, and I will show you the result in this video. On top of that, for me as a Laravel developer, there was the third important announcement yesterday. Here's the tweet: Laravel AI SDK was released, which I decided to put to the test immediately with those two models. So this will be one project, and then there will be another project to test, and I will compare the code quality, the speed, the usage at the end, and the end result of what those models produced. So the main sentiment before those releases in the community is kind of summarized by this tweet: build fast, Claude code with Opus, but built right, use Codex. So Codex used to be really slow, much slower than Opus, with roughly similar results, and I felt the same thing. So I was on Claude Code on $100 per month plan, and Codex I do have subscription as well, $20 subscription or $25 on ChatGPT Pro plan I think it's called, and I used Codex kind of as a plan B. So will I switch after this video? We'll see at the end. So my first project was to use Laravel AI SDK to build the thumbnail for YouTube from video title and description. And this is the result produced by Opus and with Nano Banana API, with Gemini API, and this is the result produced by Codex. They both delivered. So let me show you the prompt, the process, and the takeaways from this experiment. The reason why I use Laravel AI SDK because it's really fresh, so LLMs are totally not trained on it at all. But luckily, Laravel team released a skill for Laravel AI, which is inside of Laravel Boost package, so both models had a skill to use. But also I wanted to test if both models would actually discover and use that skill. And here's my prompt. So I have installed a fresh Laravel project, installed Laravel AI SDK manually, prepared the boost, prepared the guidelines and the skill. And here's the actual code that was delivered, and I will talk about that in a minute. Just I wanted to show you. So on the left we have Opus, and we have .agents skills, and we have that developing with AI SDK skill as it should be to be taken into the model. Also there's file Claude MD and agents.md for Opus and Codex. So I was trying to level up the initial game for both models. Same project, is just the copy of the same initial Laravel installation, same skills, same Claude MD and agents.md. Just in case, I also provided the links to the docs on GitHub to Markdown, but both models didn't actually need that. They both delivered, and quite quickly. So in 4 minutes, both models did at the same time, within seconds, delivered these 5 files. So in terms of speed, surprisingly to me, GPT-5.3-Codex was the same speed as Opus. So that was already a huge improvement in my eyes. Now let's take a look at the code differences. And by the way, disclaimer, which levels of the models do I use? It's actually getting more granular, so Opus 4.6, and then you can choose high effort, medium, or low with arrows. So for Opus, I've chosen high, which is the default, and for Codex, I've chosen 5.3, but also low, medium, high, and extra high. I thought for some reason to choose just high, not extra high, and I think it was a good decision if you take a look at the results. So the first screenshot I wanted to emphasize is that both models successfully use the skill. So this is the skill name developing with AI SDK, and this is why they didn't need to consult Markdown from GitHub official documentation. Also, both models successfully discovered other skills like Tailwind CSS, like pest testing. I was thinking that maybe Codex is not as efficient with skills. In fact, both models are good. And now the code differences. I noticed 5 of them. First, the test was generated only by Codex. Opus did not generate automated tests, although it's in Claude MD to generate tests with every new feature. So that's one difference. And then Opus, for some reason, published the config AI for like provider API keys and models of choice, but it actually was not needed. It could have skipped that step. So this is the file differences. Then, probably the main difference is that Opus generated the image with default model, which is Gemini Nano Banana, and I will show you which model in a minute. And Codex has decided to do this: generate with provider Gemini with model Gemini 2.5 Flash image. I didn't specify any model in particular except for just Nano Banana API, and the default for Gemini provider is this: Gemini 3 Pro image preview. So Codex, for some reason, without consulting me, decided to lower the quality of the model. Maybe to save my tokens, I'm not sure. This is one of those subtle decisions by LLMs, and I talk about that in a previous video here on my channel, that the mistakes of LLMs changed. And even though the actual function works, there may be some decisions along the way that LLM made for you which you may not notice, and then it may have consequences. And you can even see the visual results. So this thumbnail was produced by Gemini Pro, and this thumbnail with Gemini Flash, even making a typo mistake, AI SDK, the letter K is missing. And two more things that Codex did do that Opus did not is add try-catch in the controller. So that is a great practice, especially for such long and risky operation. And in Opus, we don't see any try-catch, just directly image generate. And also kind of a small thing, but in the validation file, in the form request, there are just rules by Opus, and Codex went a bit deeper, and in that file provided the method messages with overriding the error messages to be more human-friendly. Kind of a small detail, but this is one of the examples why GPT Codex historically, not just the latest model version, but also even before, some code were more thorough, kind of deeper. That's why it took longer. But in this example, in this experiment, the time was the same, and Codex code was in fact better. Generated test, a few more things like messages and try-catch. The only thing was overriding the model, which I didn't like. But this is even debatable whether this is a mistake or attempt to save my tokens. It may be actually not a bug, but a feature. And also, in fact, it is my mistake. I should have provided that in the initial prompt. So yeah, this was the first experiment with Laravel AI SDK. Let's go to the second project experiment. The second comparison experiment is a real project from Upwork, which I actually worked on earlier. So I have a video how I built this project in 3 hours in 22 minutes with Claude Code for premium members of AI Coding Daily, if you want to watch that. And I decided to repeat the same thing, at least part of it, the first phases of this project, with new models. So I've prepared this plan project phases. It's in the docs, and then phase 1, 1.1, and then a lot of details with user stories. This is what I typically do for longer projects to deliver them phase by phase, which allows me to prompt the LLMs with just like work on phase 1. Because all the details are here, Laravel is already installed with all the boost and other packages needed, and LLM can just deliver. Well, just. Let's see how they did. So these are my prompts. The screenshots, just the prompt of work on phase 1 of phases document. I intentionally gave a longer task, so not phase 1.1, but a bigger one to test the models, and the same prompt in Codex. And then I did the same thing for 3 first phases of that document. There are, in fact, from what I remember, 11 phases in total, so I didn't dig really deeper. From 3 first phases, it was enough to see the speed and comparison, and did they deliver. And these are my notes about the speed. So for those 3 phases, Codex was a little bit slower, like 6 minutes versus 8 minutes, 7 versus 9, and 8 versus 10. So it's kind of like 20–30% slower, but it used to be much slower, like 2 to 3x slower than Opus. This was actually one of the reasons why I didn't use Codex daily that much and chose Opus, just because of the speed. And code quality seemed to be on par or roughly similar. But is it? I asked Claude, I asked Anthropic to compare. So we have 3 commits separately, commit phase 1, commit phase 2, phase 3, and I prompted, and let's see how Claude itself compares the result. This is the file generated by phase 1. It incorrectly detects that it GPT-3, but it doesn't really matter that much. So these are the differences in the code. I will actually put that file somewhere on Google Drive and you can read that in full. I will just go to conclusions. So 10 points, and then at the end, overall verdict. Codex produced more thorough and production-ready implementation. More careful about this and that, Opus produced clean, functional code, then made unnecessary cosmetic changes, hard-coded URLs, and missed updating the UI and docs. So Opus was faster for a reason, that it didn't do some of the stuff. Here's the comparison file for phase 2, and again I will just look at conclusion. Quite a lot of stuff, so again I will put it on GitHub if you want to, or on Google Drive in fact, if you want to read it yourself. An overall verdict, Codex again produced more thorough implementation. And remember, this comes from Claude code from Anthropic. And see the thing that it pointed out, significantly more depth in forward-thinking patterns. And these are a few details. But however, Opus has its strength as well, better UX, and this is what I noticed in other tweets that I've read about Opus 4.6. So in terms of graphics, in terms of UI, in terms of how it's presented, Opus did perform better than Codex in other tests by other people. Also, if you're a bigger fan of simpler, cleaner implementations without premature optimizations, maybe Opus will be your favorite. So yeah, bottom line, Opus focused on more UX polish, and Codex focused on basically ensuring that production app will work. I would vote for latter personally. But of course, ideal implementation would combine both approaches. And then the third phase with a lot of filament code here, but it doesn't even matter that much what is the code, it's just comparing apples to apples. So overall verdict, phase 3 is the closest match. Both produced well-structured functional implementations. So it's probably depending on the task. On some tasks, the models are similar. And also you can read, again, Opus is better at admin UX. And in this case, Opus produced more tests, which was the other way around in other phases. And also I asked Claude to combine those 3 files into kind of scorecard at the end, and this is the result. Again, a lot of details, and this is not really readable here with this zoom, but what we actually care about is the score at the end. So by the standard decided by Anthropic itself, Codex received 26 points versus 17 points by Opus. And I really like the conclusion at the end. Senior dev would ship Codex backend with Opus UX polish. And also I noticed a few similar sentiments from people testing Codex and Opus on Twitter, so this is one of the examples. So Codex 5.3 is way faster than 5.2, and this may be a significant game changer. Codex produced more correct code, but Opus seems better at UI and coding style. Kind of the same things that I see myself. Also, I forgot to mention the plan mode. So Claude Code is pretty famous for plan mode, which is basically tasks list. And it's nice to watch Claude Code in action. Also, it may ask some questions. And I always thought that Codex is weaker here. But in this case, I didn't find the weakness. There's also a similar plan in action. So if the initial prompt with details is ready for just rolling and one-shotting, then both models provide pretty well-structured plan. And finally, the usage. After all those 4 experiments for each model, this was my usage on Opus. I'm on $100 max plan of Anthropic, and it used 24% of my 5-hour session, which I think is okay. It's a pretty regular number for pretty long queries and prompts. So some people online reported that Opus 4.6 is more token hungry. I haven't noticed that specifically, but it's hard to compare side by side. And with Codex, this was my usage at the end of the session, so 77% left of 5-hour limit, which means 23% used. So actually very similar, almost identical to Opus, with the difference that I'm on $20 plan on ChatGPT Pro. Or in fact, I double-checked, it's plus plan, and it is 23 euros, which is $25 per month, not 20, sorry. But still, it's 25 versus 100. So in terms of weekly usage, it's the same usage with very significantly different price. but I probably need to play around some more. So the weekly usage is 6% and weekly usage on Codex is 9%. So probably the weekly usage would even the result with the pricing, but I need to play around with those more, which is exactly my plan for weekend and next week. So I will update with more videos and details on that. So the question is, will I switch from Anthropic 100 max plan to maybe using Codex as my main model? I think I will do it for a while as an experiment. I will try to create a bigger project end-to-end with just Codex, and we'll try to catch the full experience because Claude Code has a lot of things in their terminal UI like planning mode and other terminal commands that maybe are not there in the Codex. So sometime next week, expect from me a video like I've created a project with Codex and what were my conclusions. But for now, I think GPT-5.3-Codex is much stronger argument than Opus 4.6 compared to 4.5. The code is more thorough and deeper in most cases, and the speed is not an issue anymore, or not such a significant issue. So with that in mind, I see more people will try Codex probably in upcoming weeks, and we'll see what happens. Maybe we will see another shift in the market towards Codex. And also, as usual, I will try to follow and summarize those trends for you guys on this channel, and also on my website AICodingDaily.com. There's a free weekly newsletter that you can subscribe to. I send that every Wednesday, and now new subscribers get a link to my premium tutorial Claude Code favorite tips and tricks I published recently. So yeah, if you want to follow all the news and trends and my personal opinion, subscribe at the bottom of the website. The link will be in the description below. So yeah, what do you think about Opus and GPT Codex new models? Have you tried? What is your experience? Let's discuss in the comments below. That's it for this time, and see you guys in other videos.